Welcome back. I am going to bring up the weather again just because I can. But if you are as sick of this winter spring weather as I am, all the snow, you know what? Sign your kids up for tennis. And for more on why, here's Jason Andera.
We are breaking ground here with high school tennis coverage. I think this is the first time we've had tennis coverage. A great sport, one of the few sports in the spring that can be moved inside. And that's why we're covering it today, because we had some tennis between Sioux Falls O'Gorman and Brandon Valley today. They moved their match to Match Point, an indoor facility here in Sioux Falls, where the temperature and the wind were ideal. So they played 10-game pro sets. First 1 to 10 games wins the match. O'Gorman has had some great singles play over the past few years. And here in the number 1 singles, Cade Damgard taking on Brandon Valley's Matthew Schmitz. And Damgard gets the 10-2 decisive victory. The number 2 singles, Will McDonald takes on Brandon Valley's Carson Monk. And McDonald gets the 10-1 victory. Again, O'Gorman taking the win. Let's move on to the number 3 singles. Michael Youssef taking on Brandon Valley's Jacob Franzen, and another dominating win for O'Gorman. Youssef gets the 10-1 advantage. And in doubles, Damgard and McDonald take a 2-game lead over Schmitz and Monk, and they complete the day. So O'Gorman dominating on the indoor surface for tennis. They are off to a good start this season. They'll be playing hopefully more of their matches outdoors here in the coming weeks. All right, let's move on to the football field. Never too early to talk a little fall sports. The South Dakota High School Board of Directors approved the first reading of a proposal to add 6-man football to South Dakota. This has been getting a lot of buzz around South Dakota lately. Currently, 6-man football is sanctioned in 5 different states, including Nebraska, Wyoming, Montana, and Texas. Here's some footage from some of those games, and as you can see, the field is a little shorter. Looks like he's on the 4-yard line. He's actually in the end zone because they can play 80-yard fields, so they move the end zone in a little bit. You can see the sidelines. They're standing right on the field. Makes it look like a lot more shorter of a game. Everybody's eligible, by the way, except for the quarterback, who must pass or throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage. Everybody else is fair game to go catch a ball. So other than that, it's a lot like 9-man football. Now, the opponents of this say that we're going to have a few problems with 6-man football in South Dakota because not a lot of teams are going to want to move to different rules. And not a lot of teams are going to want to play on the smaller fields or make that investment. But there's going to be a lot of proponents as well that want to keep football alive in towns that don't have a close co-op partner. The sheer number makes it too hard for football teams to play for some schools. The idea was originally proposed by Doug Schauer from Faith, South Dakota, who thinks it might solve some problems for schools like his that have so much distance to travel if they were going to try to co-op with somebody else. 6-man football was played in South Dakota back in the 60s, but it's been shelved for decades since they switched to the 9-man game. I know they turned 6-man football up in North Dakota last year. A few schools jumped on board. And speaking of North Dakota, we've got Jody Norstedt to talk some spring sports, but I want to talk about this 6-man football issue a little bit. First of all, Jody, it's good to see you. And second of all, let's talk about the 6-man football. How did that work in North Dakota last year?
Well, I mean, keep in mind, it's been around for 2 decades in the border state over in Montana. Last year, North Dakota had 3 teams in the division that played an independent 6-man schedule. It was Alexander, Center Stanton, and Mandaree. There's also a co-op dubbed Mondack that has players from Westby, Montana, and Granora, North Dakota. That's about 30 miles away. That team, go figure, actually won the Montana 6-man state title, the first in school history. But I think those teams were just happy to have their community have a sense of pride in their teams and not having to co-op with a bunch of different schools, not having to get on a bus to go to practice every day for a lot of those kids. So I think in a way they really appreciated the camaraderie of just having their community be a part of that in the 6-man ranks. And they played some of those schools twice, then they played some schools in Montana. So a little different schedule. There's no class for it at the North Dakota High School State Championships, but like I mentioned, the one team that did co-op with a Montana team won a state championship.
You know, I think it's going to be a little different here in South Dakota, where a lot of 9-man coaches I talked to just in the last 48 hours about this hot topic say it's going to be too hard for them to schedule because they don't know how many of these teams are willing to move to six-man football. They prefer to play the nine-man brand that they've been accustomed to over the past few decades. And they're worried that, maybe a team from the northwest part of the state, southeast part of the state, all these teams there are only a handful of teams that actually play six-man football. It's going to be a lot of travel to and fro, like let's say Langford, for instance, a 9B school doesn't want to play six-man football. They know they'd have to travel to the northwest part of the state so often. So I think there's a lot of obstacles in the way, although this looks like a pretty serious proposal by the South Dakota Board of Directors.
And I say that the advantage that North Dakota has with Montana being right there, and the teams that are doing the six-man in North Dakota are right all on that side of the state, right next to the border. So that's kind of the advantage where they can go and play those Montana schools, get some quality games in where they're not playing each other every time. And I think you have to have a good core, like you mentioned, that's willing to do this and do it together and actually give it a legitimate shot.
Well, the original proposal in South Dakota, just for those who aren't aware, would take the lowest class of nine-man football, take it out, turn that into six-man football, and just have the two classes of nine-man football, which I think is nice to have just the two classes. But I don't know how many teams are going to play six-man football. I think the ones that will play will be in western South Dakota, so maybe they can just travel north and play a few of those teams in North Dakota.
Why not? Those are some tough trips, but you think about what they did in Class 2A this year in North Dakota. They had teams going from across the state because they only had 10 teams in that division. So you had people from Wahpeton going all the way over to Watford City to play regular season games. So it's not unheard of. But the challenge for us, Jandy, would be keeping track with the points because the field goals are worth 4 points instead of 3. Kick PATs are worth 2 points instead of 1. So it'd be a little bit bonkers for us to get used to.
Yeah, and that's what it's really all about, Jody, is how would it be for us putting together a top 5 of maybe a class of only 10 teams. Like that might be a little too difficult for us too. But it is interesting. There's a lot of pros, a lot of cons. They're going to debate this in South Dakota, vote on it on June 7th. So we should know, and that will be not for this next season, but for the season following, the 1920 season in South Dakota. So we'll keep our ears open here. Let's talk a little bit more about what's going on in North Dakota, Jody.
Yeah, football season is far off from now. So let's chat about what's going on currently. And what's going on currently is the fact that we finally have some baseball and softball going on outside. Last night, they made some history in Castleton by playing their first game on their brand new turf, hosting Mayport CG. Take a look at this, and this is just the start. They're getting a new turf football field, an 8-lane track that should be ready for this fall for the Squirrels. It was cold out, but these young ladies were just happy to be playing a game for the first time. Central Cass pushed across 2 runs in the first. Isabel Lennard pounds a hit off the turf and into left field. Lexi Boer crosses home plate. Home team was rolling. It took a web gem from Mayport CG to end the inning. Dallas Jorgensen snags this line drive to end the threat, keeping the Squirrels at just a 2-run lead at the end of 1. In the second, Peyton Richter, the Squirrels pitcher, helps her own cause, finding the gap in right center. Kenzie McKinnon makes it 3-0. This Central Cass team can hit like crazy. They averaged a state best 13 runs per game last year in Class B. Maddie Sweep with the exclamation point, a 3-run homer. The All-State selection is going to be a huge weapon again this year. Central Cass cruised to the 12-2 win in 5 innings. It may have been a cold day, but for these players, it was fun to finally be playing a game, and to do it on a brand new field made it even more special.
It's amazing that everyone in our community has helped us get to this point, and just walking out here, it makes you feel special, and you just kind of get chills up your back, and you're just like, oh, this is great.
I think it's really a tribute to the community, the school and the community, the support that they're giving to this program, and supporting the girls and supporting what we're trying to do with softball. It is a great day. As soon as we started taking infield, I was like, wow, this is the field is beautiful. It's in great shape.
As an outfielder, when they're one hops to you, the ball hops way higher, and so it's super different versus the ones that usually roll at your feet. And as a batting's not quite different, but fielding's pretty different.
Awesome to see that. Central Cass now was my preseason number 2 team behind defending state champ Kindred Richland. The Squirrels are going to be tough to beat this year. Kelly, I was out there shooting the game last night. It was cold. You could see the breath of some of the players, but it sure beats practicing indoors for the 30th straight day or whatever it is. Back to you.
Oh yeah, they'll definitely tough that out to be outside. Thank you, Jody. Well, when we come back, we are talking playoffs in head-to-head. It's a Grand Forks showdown with Marty Mueller and Alex Heinert. Stay tuned.
Midco Sports Tonight, presented by Andera Orthopedics.